faithfully delivering value by interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, I'm introducing the book Emperor Qianlong, written by the famous American sinologist Mark Eliot. Now, you might be wondering, why should we read Chinese history penned by foreigners? Do they really know China better than Chinese people? Well, it's true that foreigners don't grasp China better than the Chinese themselves. But as historian Zhu Weisheng put it, Chinese look at their history from inside the house. On the other hand, foreigners see Chinese history from outside, while Chinese can nail down all the intricate details. Foreign scholars shine with their broad global historical view, helping situate Chinese history in the world context. The author of this book, Mark Eliot, argues that during Qianlong's reign, Qing China was deeply involved in global history across economy, culture, and politics. So when studying Qianlong, we shouldn't assume China was isolated. Instead, compare Qing with other empires of the time, and Qianlong with rulers like Elizabeth I and Louis XIV. This way, we can greatly enrich our understanding. By viewing Qianlong this way, we grasp his role in global history. Moving on, we'll explore the book's original take on Qianlong. The book covers Qianlong's life through politics, military, culture, and foreign affairs. First, let's look at the political aspect. We all know Qing was established by Manchus, yet Manchus were just a tiny fraction, 1 in 250, of China's population, with the vast majority being Han Chinese. Thus, balancing Manchus and Han was a big challenge for Qing emperors. Qianlong balanced them by adopting Han traditions to reduce Han resentment. Second, striving to preserve Manchu identity to prevent assimilation by Han Chinese. Speaking of Han traditions, Confucianism tops the list. Qianlong embraced Confucianism by promoting filial piety and honoring Confucius, the latter being straightforward. But why promote filial piety? Confucianism teaches order the family, rule the state, bring peace to the world. Family comes first, highlighting its crucial role. And in family relationships, the most important thing is filial piety. In ancient Chinese society, almost all relationships were hierarchical, like ruler-subject relations or superior-subordinate relations among officials. And in the family, this relationship manifests as the father-son relationship. If a person can be filial to their father, it's reasonable to believe they'll be loyal to superiors and thus to the emperor. Promoting filial piety is a key way to maintain dynastic rule. The Manchu rulers certainly wouldn't overlook the Han people. So since filial piety is so crucial, the emperor naturally led by example. Thus, he often found ways to demonstrate his filial devotion to the whole world. For example, Emperor Qianlong voluntarily abdicated after 60 years on the throne, becoming the retired emperor. This was because his grandfather, Kang-Qian, reigned for 61 years before that, making him the longest reigning emperor in Chinese history. To show his filial piety, Qianlong left the record holder position to his grandfather. As for his mother, Qianlong was also extremely filial. For instance, because she was a Buddhist, he specially built a shrine for her, housing nearly 800 Buddhist statues. After his mother passed away, Qianlong placed the hair she shed during her years of Buddhist practice into a Tibetan Buddhist box and later built a golden hair pagoda to ensuring her hair. According to records, the golden hair pagoda was made entirely of gold and silver, weighing 107.5 kilograms. Another example. On his mother's 50th birthday, Qianlong wore colorful feathered clothes and performed a dance with his brothers and descendants for her. For her 60th birthday, he took his travel-loving mother to the pleasant climate of Jiangnan for a tour. At 70, Qianlong felt it was unsuitable to take her to distant Jiangnan again. But since she loved Suzhou so much, he ordered the construction of a market identical to Suzhou in Beijing, so she could experience Suzhou there. Having discussed Qianlong's emphasis on filial piety, Let's now look at his reverence for Confucius. You might have heard that Qianlong was an avid travel enthusiast. According to historians' records, Qianlong spent up to 15 years traveling during his life, roughly a quarter of his reign. And one important destination of his tours was Confucius's hometown Khufu in Shandong. Throughout his life, he visited Khufu 8 times. However, Qianlong's tours weren't just leisure trips, they served as crucial political tools. He used this approach to demonstrate reverence for Confucian sages, thereby winning over Han scholars devoted to Confucianism. Author Mark Elliott argues that Qianlong's Confucian reverence did somewhat ease Manchu-Han tensions. Yet simultaneously, he became burdened by Confucianism's rigid and conservative ideologies, because a Confucian revering dynasty emphasized that ancestral laws must remain unchanged. Qianlong lacked both the will and capability to implement thorough governmental reforms. The author compares Qianlong with Russia's Peter the Great. Peter the Great, Russia's late 17th to early 18th century ruler, introduced Western technology and reformed politics, economy, and military, setting Russia on modernization. Eliot contends Qianlong failed to reform, like Peter, due to Confucian traditions. Another issue with adopting Han customs was the erosion of Manchu identity. The Manchus took greatest pride in their warrior spirit, mastery of archery and horsemanship. But by Qianlong's era, founders' descendants neglected riding and archery for city comforts, holding dice and brushes instead of weapons. Many soldiers pawned gear due to costs. Mandarin speakers increased in court, while Manchu speakers dwindled. These signs showed Manchu distinctiveness fading, with identity facing crisis. Eliot attributes this to two causes: ancestral success, breeding complacency, hindering later generations from maintaining pioneering spirit. 14th century Arab historian Ibn Khaldun noted royal decay after 4 generations. Founders understood nation-building costs, preserving founding spirit post-establishment. Their sons witnessed or participated in the founding struggle, learning virtues through paternal example. By the 3rd generation, founding hardships faded, replaced by complacency in wealth and comfort. Starting from the 4th generation, the nation would decline in every aspect. By Qianlong's era, the bannermen had been inside the pass for 6 or 7 generations. Their situation was predictable. On the other hand, the Han Chinese had a vast population, long history, and exceptionally rich culture. This led to the Manchus being culturally conquered by the Han, even while utilizing Han traditions. Sinicization thus occurred subtly through this process. Qianlong believed Manchu distinctiveness was the Qing Dynasty's foundational strength. To preserve ethnic identity and prevent Han assimilation, he implemented 4 measures: strengthening the 8th banner system and promoting Manchu language. 3rd, reshaping Manchu history. 4th, holding grand hunting expeditions. First, let's discuss strengthening the 8th banner system. The 8th banner system was a military unit founded by Qing Taozu Nurhaci. The system organized Manchus into distinct units for efficient command and management. The Qing dynasty relied primarily on the 8 Banners army to conquer the realm. After the Qing's establishment, those enrolled in the 8 Banners became known as bannermen. As Qing military nobility, they enjoyed numerous privileges, but by Qianlong's time, growing bannerman populations led to corruption and impoverishment. Their living conditions worsened. To address this and preserve Manchu tradition, Qianlong gave funds, allocated land for development, and helped establish industries for bannermen. Another crucial measure was purging impostors from banners' rosters. Additionally, Han Chinese enrolled in the banners sometimes had to make room for newborn Manchus. Next, promoting the Manchu language. Qianlong saw language as vital to ethnic identity. Facing Manchus forgetting their tongue, he founded official Manchu schools, translated Chinese classics into Manchu, and compiled dictionaries. The third measure for preserving Manchu identity was reshaping history to inspire ethnic pride. For example, Qianlong personally wrote Ode to Mukden, glorifying the Manchu homeland, modern Shenyang. To amplify its reach, he ordered the ode carved and published in 32 Chinese and 32 Manchu seal script styles. Additionally, Qianlong commissioned a historical text called Manchu Origins and History. The book comprehensively traced Manchu development while emphasizing their ancient roots and numerous tribes. Qianlong's final measure to preserve ethnic identity was holding grand hunting expeditions. Hunting expeditions, are basically organized hunts. Early Manchus developed their elite 8 banners through large-scale hunts. Military forces. Through these hunts, Qianlong aimed to reconnect Manchus with ancestral bravery and strength, passing down these virtues. During his reign, he held over 50 hunts, each involving tens of thousands, effectively small military exercises. Qianlong's last hunt participation was at age 84, nearly 5 years before his death. Though these efforts had some effect, we know Manchu distinctiveness ultimately faded. For Qianlong, this was likely a significant regret. But for China, this Manchu-Han fusion profoundly shaped history. Consider comparing Qing with India's Mughal Empire, both ruled by minorities, but unlike Qianlong, who embraced Han traditions, Mughals never accepted Hinduism, leading to different outcomes. Manchus gradually Sinicized, losing ethnic identity but maintaining a vast centralized state. The Mughals, alienating majority support, faced sectarian conflicts and revolts in the 18th century, falling to British rule. Having covered Qianlong's political balancing of Manchu-Han relations and preservation efforts, let's examine his military and cultural achievements. The key term for Qianlong's military record is 10 Great Campaigns. These 10 campaigns occurred in border regions during his reign, carrying connotations of flawless completeness, specifically by modern divisions, 3 in Xinjiang, 2 in Tibet, 2 in Sichuan, and 1 each in Taiwan, Myanmar, and Vietnam. It was precisely these battles that expanded China's territory by 1/3, laying the foundation for its modern shape. So how large-scale were these 10 wars? We can compare it to Europe of the same era. Just the campaigns in Xinjiang alone rivaled Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812. In terms of battlefield vastness, Paris to Moscow is 2,400 kilometers, while Beijing to Xinjiang's Tarim Basin is 3,700 kilometers. Half the route is desert, making logistics incredibly tough. Range-wise, Napoleon's Russian invasion lasted 9 months, while Qianlong's wars around Tian Shan spanned over 3 years. Outcome-wise, Napoleon's 500,000-strong army marched to Russia, but retreated disgracefully with only 10,000 to 20,000 men left. Whereas Qianlong successfully pacified Xinjiang tribes and expanded Qing territory. This reflects the Qing Dynasty's formidable strength, with ample troops enduring such prolonged wars. These massive victories filled Qianlong with pride, and he proudly called himself the perfect old man. Not only that, he used all sorts of ways to proclaim his greatness worldwide. For example, grand triumphal ceremonies, military parades, victory banquets, writing poetry, and mapping territories. Among these, engraved stone steles were the most direct way to awe people. On huge steles, the emperor's words were carved, one side in Chinese, another in Manchu, sometimes with Mongolian and Tibetan. Some steles stood at borders, others were placed in Beijing's Imperial Academy. Even if you couldn't understand the inscriptions, just gazing up at them made visitors feel the majesty of Qing rule. Besides steles, Qianlong loved commissioning palace painters for war-themed art, especially portraits of himself. One painting shows Qianlong in military gear, wearing a silver helmet, riding a horse with reins in his left hand, and a whip in his right. Truly heroic. Copies of these paintings were gifted to temples, key officials, and even spread to Korea, Europe, and America. But military achievements alone couldn't satisfy him. To gain scholars' respect and consolidate his personal authority, Qianlong also worked hard to achieve cultural accomplishments. He was passionate about writing poetry, composing over 43,000 poems in his lifetime, making him the most prolific poet in Chinese history. So, what does that huge number of poems mean? Suppose he started writing at age 10 and died at 89. He'd need to create about 2 poems every day on average. For example, while appreciating Wang Shizi's calligraphy, he imagined the scene and wrote Hui Fan Fu Tao Sheng, Xi Hui Yu Guan. While touring Westlake, he wrote a poem praising the evening bell of Nanping. Qing Ye Guan Shu Yi Kui Ping, Shuang Zhong Duan Shu Song Lai Sham. As for his most beloved first empress, Empress Chao Shanchun of the Fuka clan, she often appeared in his poems after her death. For instance, Kui Lai Bu Gao Kwa Wu Si Lian Zi Ping An Bao. This expressed his melancholy for the departed. Emperor Qianlong could be inspired to write poetry almost anywhere, anytime. The entire complete Tang poems collection has only about 48,000 poems. Yet Qianlong alone wrote nearly as many as all surviving Tang Dynasty poems combined. Voltaire, a French writer of his era, once said he admired the gentleness and virtue in Qianlong's poetry. Besides creating, Qianlong collected vast artworks, including calligraphy, paintings, porcelain, jade, coins, and even European clocks. He had these treasures cataloged and numbered, recording details like size, color, material, storage location, and even sketching them, compiling a meticulous catalog index. Qianlong's collecting obsession seemed like an art hobby on the surface, but deeper down, it reflected his near obsessive desire to own the whole world, even as a miniature realm in the Forbidden City. This mindset wasn't unique. In Europe, expanding royal power led rulers to similar ideas, birthing large museums, claiming to display everything under the sun. However, museums were more open, showing how royal authority extended to ordinary people. Whereas Qianlong's royal collection was only accessible to a select few officials. And Qianlong's most crucial cultural move was compiling a massive encyclopedic series, the complete library of the four treasuries. Emperor Qianlong ordered that, starting in 1773, all kinds of classics, histories, philosophies, and literary collections be collected nationwide. Then, high-quality versions were selected, copied, proofread, and corrected, ultimately forming a grand series of 36,000 volumes. Mark Elliott believes that Qianlong compiled such a massive series despite the cost and labor, mainly for 4 reasons. First, to expand his personal collection. Second, to secure a place in the Confucian Hall through grand cultural projects. Third, provide scholars with accurate texts. Many ancient texts, after generations of copying, often contained numerous errors. The texts selected for the complete library were carefully chosen by the most learned scholars of the time, representing versions closest to the original appearance of the ancient texts. At this point, you might wonder, isn't this just about textual differences? Is it really that important? Yes, it's extremely important. For example, in Europe, significant differences among sects often stem from differing interpretations of certain biblical accounts. One could say that every word and sentence in the Bible is crucial. In China, Confucian classics hold the same status as the Bible. The words in these classics directly influence what constitutes orthodox thought and what is right and wrong. Thus, for such important texts, Emperor Qianlong naturally wanted to control the discourse and become the authority. When it comes to the compilation of the complete library, there's another reason that absolutely cannot be avoided. Emperor Qianlong did this to search for and destroy anti-Qing writings among the people. As mentioned earlier, before compiling the complete library, Qianlong first ordered the collection of books nationwide for reference. Some of these collected books were copied and preserved, while others were destroyed. The ones burned were mainly works opposing Qing rule, but the emperor's orders were easily pushed to extremes during implementation. The extreme consequence of this was the unleashing of unprecedented and harsh literary inquisitions. Mark Eliot believes that these literary inquisitions were largely the result of lower officials and gentry playing power games, diverging from Qianlong's original intent in compiling the complete library. All right, so far I've discussed Qianlong's considerations and actual impacts on domestic politics and culture. In fact, during the 18th century, China had already established connections with neighboring countries and even European nations. And so next, let's talk about international relations during Qianlong's reign. The Qing dynasty's arrogance in considering itself the Celestial Empire is well known. But to be clear, Emperor Qianlong acknowledged other nations beyond the Qing dynasty, like the Netherlands, India, and Russia, and he knew he had no control over these countries. At this point, you might find it strange. Isn't this obvious? Actually not. For example, Genghis Khan's correspondence with medieval European kings and popes shows he viewed the entire world as his dominion. Compared to that, Qianlong was less arrogant, but he didn't see himself as ruling just China either. He believed many surrounding nations were under his rule, like Korea in East Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia in Southeast Asia, and Central Asian states. This rule wasn't direct. Qing didn't appoint officials or register populations there. Instead, they used the tributary system. Tributary relations meant, surrounding states periodically sent envoys to Beijing to pay homage and offer tribute. The process was complex. Envoys waited hours, duration based on status, before audiences. During audiences, rituals varied by rank, right knee bends, kneeling, or kowtowing. Then tribute like jewels, Korean ginseng, and rhino horns was presented. In return, the emperor gifted jade, tea, silk, and imperial banquet dishes, all carefully graded like the rituals. King ranked these states and lured them with benefits to maintain this hierarchical order, creating an illusion of organized submission. Today, this tributary superiority seems hollow, but Qianlong was utterly enchanted. How much? For example, in 1754, Sulu, a Philippine sultanate, requested annexation into China to avoid Spanish invasion, asking to enroll its people in Qing household registries. However, Qianlong decisively rejected this request. In Qianlong's view, Sulu's territory and people were already under Qing rule through the tributary system. This loose control satisfied him completely. Sulu's request for annexation was entirely unnecessary. While Qing adhered to tributary relations, Europe developed the state-to-state diplomacy we recognize today. This system focused on negotiating territories and trade through treaties, not tribute-paying ceremonies. Well, each playing by their own rules was fine until they collided. Friction became inevitable. The McCartney Embassy we know exemplifies this clash of systems. During Qianlong's reign, China maintained close trade ties with European nations. Europe craved Chinese specialties like tea, porcelain, and silk. For instance, 1/7 of China's annual tea output went to Britain. But China had little demand for European manufactured goods, causing massive silver outflow from Britain. Technically, Britain faced chronic trade deficits with China. Amid this imbalance, Britain dispatched the McCartney Embassy. These European envoys aimed to negotiate treaties increasing Sino-British trade, more open ports, a trade base, and a permanent Beijing envoy. But Qianlong, oblivious to such concepts, received them strictly through tributary protocols. After prolonged waiting, McCartney finally secured an audience. But a major etiquette conflict arose during the Qianlong audience. McCartney saw kowtowing as degrading to British royal dignity and adamantly refused. After intense negotiations, King exempted him from kowtowing, permitting the meeting. Both sides exchanged gifts and held a banquet. The banquet concluded. By Qianlong's understanding, the embassy's mission was complete. Qing had received them, heard greetings, and performed grand rituals. But from the British perspective, the mission had just begun. Now they could finally negotiate trade with the Qing Empire. However, McCartney repeatedly tried scheduling talks with Qing officials, only to be refused each time. Left with no choice, he wrote down his discussion points and handed them to Qing officials. On the day the British delegation was leaving Beijing, Qianlong responded, first arrogantly, to the British king, "I've accepted all the gifts you brought. But the great Qing frequently receives treasures from all nations. We lack nothing, so no need for future gifts." Then Emperor Qianlong rejected every single British request without exception. Many criticize Qianlong for blind arrogance, failing to see Britain's advanced ideas and technology as threats, leading to China's humiliation half a century later. But author Mark Elliott argues that fundamentally, this encounter wasn't about right or wrong. Two entirely different diplomatic systems, like two languages, naturally failed to communicate during first contact. Of course, from a 20th century viewpoint, we can criticize Qianlong's rigidity. But Qianlong lived in the 18th century, ruling a global power. Territory rivaling Europe, a quarter of the world's population, massive economy, and chronic trade surpluses. Overall, for at least the first two-thirds of his reign, China was a prosperous empire, so Qianlong's confidence in his realm was understandable. Predicting the Opium Wars was impossible, not just for Qianlong, but for anyone worldwide, including the British, who couldn't foresee how industrialization and colonialism would reshape the mid-19th century. Thus, when judging historical figures, we must understand their context and blind spots. They weren't prophets. With that, today's content is nearly complete. Finally, let's summarize Emperor Qianlong. From the Qing's collapse to the late 21st century, Qianlong was vilified as a historical culprit, blamed for China's backwardness and humiliation. By the late 20th century, as contemporary China grew stronger, people began recognizing the prosperity of the Qianlong era, praising him once more. Author Mark Elliott says, important historical figures always attract both positive and negative evaluations. Some comments appear contradictory. Whether condemning or praising Qianlong is all too easy. The real challenge is delving into Qianlong's historical context to provide a comprehensive assessment of his reign. This book aims to offer this opportunity to both Western and Chinese readers alike. All right, that concludes our interpretation of Emperor Qianlong for you. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.